right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Monday, September 14th, 2015. And this says Before the First Cup with Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Monday, everybody. I say that with sarcasm. I hate Mondays. It is 54 degrees and partly cloudy here in upstate New York. We had a good spate of rain this weekend in the Northeast. Anybody up this way near the Great Lakes knows that we got pretty drenched. They were predicting close to an inch of rain this weekend, and I'd say we got about that. It was cold and rainy. It felt very fall-y, but it is over now. It's chilly now, but by tomorrow it's going to be back up to 80. So summer is not quite over yet. So where did we leave off on Friday? We titled the show Potential Human Transmission of Alzheimer's and Prions with a question mark. And yes, we did look 2 days at Alzheimer's, malformed proteins called prions, and some of the connections between mad cow disease, more scientifically known as bovine spongiform encephalopathy, Alzheimer's, where they now have connected those amyloids, which become the amyloid plaques, to also being caused by malformed proteins. Chronic wasting disease from that deer end up acquiring is very similar to that, as well as scrapie and some other things. And what was very disturbing is that a story came out last week that had shown that there was potentially some evidence where the pathology of Alzheimer's could be passed from person to person, and it wouldn't be from casual contact, but it would be more from bodily fluids, such as on surgical instruments, which we already knew back from mad cow, quote unquote mad cow, that prions are not alive. They're proteins. And so because of that, there was a lot of difficulty in sterilization procedures that they had discovered after the fact. They had also found there was some sick experiment they had talked about that we had actually read about. And if you want, I think I have a video on it. We could play that really quick. They were doing experiments from, I believe we'd read 1959 through 1985, where these people that had this disease, and I don't off the top of my head remember what it's called. I had it open here, but it was a disease that caused them to have small stature. It was a genetic disorder, and they were experimenting with the human growth hormone, HGH, that was being taken out of the pituitary glands of cadavers and injected into the pituitary gland of these people with this genetic disorder. And in this study, they discovered in autopsies of these people from the study who had since died that they seemed to have the human form of quote unquote mad cow, called Creutzfeldt's, which I never say it right, Creutzfeldt's Jacobs disease, or CJD for short. And they believe that it was transmitted from infected pituitary from the cadavers to these people. So there's been more research into this, and now they're kind of afraid that, yes, it could potentially, through surgical instruments, let's say, Alzheimer's having a very similar pathology to CJD and mad cow could potentially also be spread through surgical procedures and such. So anyway, hold on one second here, because I wasn't planning on playing this, but I guess we will, just because there was a video that came out after we read all these stories. So we'll listen to this. She talks about this pituitary thing and the autopsies. What's interesting is that her name is, her last name is Gupta. I don't know if Sanjay, our good old Sanjay Gupta, is married, or if this is any relation. Oops, hold on. I got speakers on here. We got to unplug. All right. Let me connect, and we'll see. And then once we do this, I actually found some even more horrifying stuff, if it's even possible, not dealing with Alzheimer's, but dealing with vaccinations and genetic modification. All right, please hurry up here, Skype. We may be connected. I don't know. It's doing some weird stuff here. My computer is hung. And hello? Hold on. I can't even get, yeah, there we go. All right. I think we're good now. All right. So is Alzheimer's something that you can catch is the question. Here we go.
5 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's today, and now a brand new bombshell studies reveals it may spread.
Yeah, and although it's not necessarily contagious, the seeds of the disease can be passed from person to person, according to this new study. Here to explain is neurologist and medical director of the Deep Brain Stimulation Program, Dr. Fiona Gupta. Nice to see you this morning,
Thank
Doctor.
you.
What did you think when you saw this study?
Well, I think like most people, it was panicking. You know, I had tons of calls come into the center. Is Alzheimer's disease contagious? But when I further delved into the study, I saw that no, you cannot develop Alzheimer's with close contact or sharing living quarters with someone with Alzheimer's. In fact, it was a very intricate study showing that patients who were exposed decades ago to a growth hormone that was taken from cadavers may have developed the seed of Alzheimer's.
But it suggests that there's an agent out there that might cause Alzheimer's, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. There's what we call the seed of Alzheimer's called beta amyloid. So in these autopsy studies of patients who died of a different disease called CJD, which is a very fatal but rare disease, these brains actually showed this amyloid seed that could develop into Alzheimer's disease in these patients. We do know that that CJD was caused by extractions of this growth hormone that they received as children decades earlier for stunted growth. So the question raises, could Alzheimer's, the protein, be similar to the CJD protein and replicate and spread? But by no means is it contagious through contact or, you know, being on the subway or sharing living quarters with a patient with Alzheimer's.
Yeah, well, I think that's the key that everybody wants to hear. To put it in layman terms, this is also from the study about the spread of Alzheimer's, that there would be some sort of abnormal protein that would be depositing around the brain, also resistant to sterilization. So that wouldn't be good if you're in the middle of surgery in the hospital, especially because it can stick to surgical instruments, according to this study as well. So should we be worried when we go to have surgery in a hospital?
So absolutely. So remember, the brains that were studied were patients who died of the CJD, the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is the prion disease. That protein is very sticky, and it can even be resistant to sterilization technique. You know, we don't know enough about the beta amyloid that causes Alzheimer's to really see if it can be resistant to sterilization. But I always encourage my patients, whether you're going for a minor or major procedure, really research where you're going and make sure that sterilization techniques, safety precautions, things like blood transfusions and so on, are really under protocol.
Ooh, so no more surgeries in Kinshasa, no matter how cheap they are.
Try not to.
Good call. So you get all the years. It's of course.
Dr. Fiona Gupta, we appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much.
So how scary is that? You know, they ask her, should you be concerned about being able to get it from surgeries or whatever? And she says, absolutely. You know, the thing that's messed up is that she said there's not enough research into the amyloids and the proteins of Alzheimer's to say that, you know, there's issues with sterilization. But from everything that I've read and everything that she said, it sure as hell sounds like that there is a lot in common between these malformed proteins in both CJD and Alzheimer's to be highly concerned. We had done a story on Friday. I just want to briefly touch on this because then something else came out of this. There were two stories. One was out of Scientific American that was quite a scientific look at being able potentially evidence for person-to-person transmission of Alzheimer's pathology. And they had discussed some of the past other diseases, like I said, such as mad cow, and we kind of dug into the mad cow too. I don't know. Did we actually look? Maybe we didn't. If we didn't, I'll have to look at the stories that I hit here after the show. But if we didn't look into Bush and the connection to mad cow in detail, I found lots of crazy stuff about that we no, it doesn't look like I did. So we might have to do that tomorrow because I found some scarier stuff for today. But anyway, CJD, mad cow, AKA bovine spongiform encephalopathy. I just like to say that. So I do. And Alzheimer's all have some relation with this malformed protein in the brain. But check this out. So Alzheimer's disease might be transmitted by blood transfusion, surgery, and hormone treatment. And one of the things that we discovered in reading this were a list of all these bodily fluids in which these proteins can be passed. And one of the things that they had suggested was gingiva. And at the time I said, I'm not really sure what that is, but yes, at the back of my mind, I had thought like gingivitis. And then Dal, one of our chatters who has delved into this stuff quite extensively, had made the comment that yes, that probably would be the gums, the science of the gums, the proteins of the gums that would mean that you would be at risk with oral surgeries as well. Well, guess what? Not only now can it be blood transfusion surgeries, which they did not designate what kind, and hormone treatments. Here a story comes out. This was a few days back on Saturday, out of Machines Like Us. Alzheimer's may be transmissible through dental surgery as well. Alzheimer's disease may be transmissible through blood transfusions and medical accidents in the same way as Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease, CJD, scientists believe, in a landmark finding described as a quote-unquote paradigm shift. And yeah, what a nice way to put it. Paradigm shift. How about like big fucking mistake that we didn't catch this? Or maybe it was intentional to see if we could have an epidemic now, because we do, of Alzheimer's and brain-wasting diseases in the world, not just the United States. I mean, this is a big deal. Findings described as a paradigm shift. Researchers at the University College of London said that it was possible that the quote-unquote seeds of dementia could be transferred from the brain tissue of one person to another. And how convenient. We have this massive brain project going on right now globally that's being funded across the board at National Institutes of Health, at universities worldwide, hospitals all involved with large brain databases such as St. John Hopkins University up in Maryland. Yeah, how convenient that DARPA is sprinkling all this money to understand the brain and being able to manipulate memories. And what cures for Alzheimer's? Yes, and now we find out that it may very possibly be epidemic because we did not know about proper sterilization procedures or transmissibility. This is just horrifying. Like, absolutely horrifying. Says worryingly, and yes, what a great adjective, worryingly, the proteins that cause dementia are like a type called prions, which can stick to metal surfaces like surgical instruments and are resistant to conventional sterilization. It means that it would be theoretically possible to become infected with Alzheimer's seeds through a blood transfusion, brain surgery, or invasive dental work like a root canal operation. Oh my God, how many millions of root canals have happened over the last 20, 30 years? Think about that. Or, hey, how about wisdom tooth extraction? I had that done back in the 80s. I mean, how horrifying. And because the incubation period, and this is what I said, plausible deniability, because the incubation period can be up to 40, count 'em years, people could be unaware that they have been contaminated. How fucking convenient. The government's chief medical officer, Dame Sally Davies, said that the Department of Health was monitoring the situation, yes, but reassured the public that there was little risk. Now, I don't even know what to say to that. In all honesty, I mean, it makes me think of the nincompoopadness that's been going on at the CDC and the Department of Defense with all of these highly virulent pathogens that have been shipped all over, or thought that they'd been what's the word I'm looking for? Deactivated, like the anthrax, using radiation to kill all the spores and then shipping it to, I believe it was 192 locations, was the last number that I saw, all across the globe. And then to go, whoops, guess what? Our deactivation procedures that we have been using for the last 20 some odd years, they don't kill it all. Yeah, just like that. And there was another story here that was linked through this, titled Alzheimer's disease may be caught through medical accidents, in the Telegraph in the UK, and says, check my internet connection, DNS probe started, web page not available. So I guess it's not going to let us read any more about that right now, but if I can get it up later, maybe I will take a screenshot or something so this doesn't happen again. But that was just an add-on to all the stuff we talked about on Friday. If you wanted to learn a little bit more, go hit the Before the First Cup archive on UCY.TV's YouTube channel, youtube.com/UCYTV, under the playlist of Before the First Cup. So heads up, people, we're going to read a little bit more about that. It's pretty horrifying. It's pretty scary. And when we start putting all these dots together, things start to make a lot of sense about all these other mad science gone mad projects that they're working on. Talking about mad science gone mad, we are now going to take a sidestep over to something else that I stumbled across a while ago. And then I found another thread on yesterday on this that I started to pull a little bit. And we know what happens when I start pulling threads. Whole sweaters start unraveling. A long time ago, when we first started digging into GMO and vaccines, and I started discovering some of the stuff that Monsanto was working on as part of their 2014 forward-looking statement of mad science and where their funding was going, and we discovered that Monsanto was messing around with RNAi technology, and that is RNA interference, and basically it allows them to go into your RNA with whether they use proteins or they're using some sort of nanotech to manipulate switches to turn things on and off within our DNA that stop the production of certain biological elements or cause a adjuvanted type reaction, so your body becomes more sensitive to, let's say, a pathogen. So it would cause your body to recognize something that maybe it wouldn't have. There's all kinds of funky things that they can now do with RNAi. Well, Monsanto was working with RNAi to be used as a quote unquote insecticide. And basically what it did, unlike glyphosate, where you would spray it on the food or splice it into the food, so then when bugs ate it, their stomachs exploded. We looked at Monsanto's spray on RNAi, right? That was something that they were experimenting with. Or splicing these changes into food so that when bugs ate it, it would do something such as flip a protein off that would then kill the bug, not in seconds, but over weeks, let's say. Now, when I first saw that, I was like, damn, think about how disturbing that is. What if it flipped some sort of protein or switch off in a human being who ate it? And of course, all of the Monsanto paid scientists say that is not possible because, you know, they're picking proteins that have nothing in common with human proteins, which may be true, but do we really understand enough? We discovered looking at the FDA, the USDA, and all of these other agencies within the federal government, how they are so totally in bed with these biopharma companies and places like Monsanto creating food, right? We have all these disasters everywhere, climate change, there isn't enough food. This is 21st century, new world order, save us from the carbon quotient type agencies, and nobody is doing long-term studies. We are getting rubber stamping. A tomato is a tomato, a potato is a potato, and an apple is an apple, so shut up and eat it because otherwise you can go hungry. And I mean, it's even gone beyond that now. You know, shut up and get your vaccine. Shut up and eat your GMO food. And one of the reasons why I'm bringing up vaccines and GMO food is because then we discovered a connection. So we started then looking at some of these newfangled vaccines, Ebola being one, and that was kind of where the red button started going off for me because some of these brand new Ebola vaccines were using the same technology as Monsanto was looking at for insecticides. Yes, RNAi to flip switches on and off. And it was like, wow, how interesting is that? They're going to be injecting this stuff into people. And of course, they declared a state of emergency in places like Africa where they can give them a 20-page document per international requirements for them to sign off on doing experimental vaccinations on people. How are Africans going to read a 20-page consent document? But regardless, they checked it off because everyone was afraid they were going to be bleeding out their eyeballs, and they tried these new vaccinations. Well, we discovered that one of these vaccinations was created using genetically modified tobacco. Do you guys remember that? And it was funded by DARPA, and it was being done at Texas A&M University, and R.J. Reynolds or Philip Morris, one of them, was involved by providing the tobacco, and they were growing it in Kentucky. And there's this very long, involved story. And then this pharmaceutical company called MAP, I believe, MAPP, was in the middle of all of this. And how horrifying. DARPA money, universities, big tobacco, and pharmaceutical all working together. Well, now that I've laid all that groundwork, yesterday I was cutting April and Verstein's show, and they had on a cardiologist who had been speaking out about measles vaccines, and it ends up the show was a little bit short, so I was kind of going through all their past shows trying to find something that I could cut in the end of the show, and I came across an interview they had done back in July, and I don't, honestly, I'm sorry ladies, I don't remember who the interview was with, but once he was off air, they were having a conversation about their interview, and they had talked about him discussing these new vaccines that they were genetically modifying food to provide us. And I was like, I had actually heard that in passing before and thought it was kind of crazy. But because I had heard it again, and I know a lot more now about genetic modification and some of the insanity that's going on, I started digging into it this weekend. Well, I need to share with you some of the stuff that I found. So anyway, here's a document out of learn.genetics.utah.edu. This is out of their genetics division at a university in Utah. It's titled Genetically Modified Foods. And I just want to read the first couple paragraphs. They are asking hypothetical situations here. What would you do in the following situations? Bullet number 1. You are a tomato farmer whose crops are threatened by a persistent species of beetle, and each year you spend large sums of money for pesticides to protect your crops. A biotechnology company introduces a new strain of tomato plant that produces a natural pesticide, making it resistant to the beetle. By switching to this new strain, you could avoid both the beetle and the chemical pesticides traditionally needed to fight it. Ding, ding. That is using this very technology that I was just talking about, RNAi, that would use RNA to flip switches within the beetle who ate it to then kill them slowly. All right, bullet point number 2. What would you do in this following situation? As a family physician, you often treat children who suffer from infectious diseases that could be prevented through vaccination. But the parents of many of your patients cannot afford the cost of vaccinations. Yes, they can't afford it. Not that they are now refusing vaccines because they're onto you. They can't afford vaccinations. Wink. But the parents of many of your patients cannot afford the cost of vaccinations, and then you hear of a new approach that would reduce the cost of a fraction of its current price. Genetically modified fruits and vegetables that contain various vaccines. And by simply eating a banana, yes, by simply eating a banana, a child could be protected against disease without getting a shot. Oh my God. Welcome to the 21st century of wonder. I mean, can you even believe this? So this made me go, holy shit. Maybe they were right. Now wait, let's get to the third bullet point. Number 3. What would you do in this situation? You are the leader of a developing nation. Some third world African nation, and hunger is a problem among your citizens. The salty coastal wetlands of your country cannot support growth of needed crops, and your slow economy can't support importing enough food for everyone. A biotechnology company has genetically modified a rice plant that can thrive in salt water, providing your nation with the opportunity to feed its citizens while bolstering its economy. What would you do? Says our ability to manipulate plants by introducing new genes promises innovative solutions to these and many other real world problems. Yet there is considerable opposition to the use of genetically modified plants for food production and other uses. Genetic engineering offers a time-saving method to produce larger, higher-quality crops with less effort and expense, yet such benefits must be balanced against the risk of changing the genetic makeup of organisms. What are those risks and how likely are they to occur? And in order to define them, we need to understand the science of plant genetic engineering. And then it goes through a very long thing about how to genetically modify a plant, and we don't really need to dig into that to understand the point I am trying to get across. So now let's hop to this next document that of course was open, and now it says that Flash is not loading and we cannot see the story. So let's try and reload the sucker because we need to read this. Let's go. I'm gonna try you in another window. Let's go, because I'm not going to take no for an answer. Yeah, I love how this crap happens. You know what? Maybe one of the things I discovered the other day is anytime I have problems loading pages, Skype is open. And if I close Skype, all of a sudden pages start loading. Hey, and look at that. I closed Skype and it loaded. All right. So they mention in that document out of one of the universities on genetic engineering in Utah, the banana vaccine. I found a story out of 2005 out of the Journal of Young Investigators, the undergraduate research journal, listed under biochemistry, September 2005. Says, when Dr. Charles Atston of Arizona State University visited Thailand in 1992, and that's another one of those nations where we have lots of poor people, he was not expecting a moment of scientific eureka that would redirect his career. However, after observing a young Thai mother soothing her fussy infant with bits of banana, this molecular biologist was struck with an idea that is both startling and ingenious. What if, in addition to quieting her child, the mother could also administer a life-saving vaccine in the banana? Oh, yes! From vision to reality. Artson's vision is well on its way to becoming reality thanks to a combination of dedication and applied biotechnology. As the president emeritus of the Boyce Thompson Institute for Plant Research, founding director of the Arizona Biomedical Institute, and member of the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, so he's right in there with the federal government, Arntzen is well equipped to handle the challenge that he has undertaken. His breakthrough lies in forging a link between green plants, foreign DNA, and vaccines. Vaccination stands as one of modern science's greatest success stories, and early experiments by Edward Jenner and Louis Pasteur taught physicians that they could prevent disease merely by exposing a patient to a weakened or inactivated pathogen. While his protocols violate today's clinical trial regulations, what does that mean? Did he give it to people without them knowing? Dr. Jenner was able to prevent children from getting smallpox even when he deliberately exposed them to it. What? After first inoculating them with the pus from cowpox. What the hell is that? Did he do that to people in Thailand without their knowledge? I don't know. Today, most new vaccines, so this guy like totally went against any humanitarian things. He deliberately exposed them to it and inoculated them with some pus from cowpox. Oh my God. Today, most new vaccines contain a specific protein or set of proteins from a pathogen of interest and not the pathogen itself. A protective immune response can result from this more limited and inherently less risky exposure. And though materially different from those developed by Jenner and Pasteur, yes, materially different from the original vaccines, modern vaccines, including Artston's, still build upon the same fundamental principle, just with more mad science. If the immune system is trained to recognize a pathogen prior to infection, the disease can be prevented when the actual pathogen is encountered. Next section, delivering to the developing world. Disease prevention via an edible vaccine is great news for people around the globe. Hey, if I had my noisemaker handy, I would toot it. The problem with current vaccination protocols and the passion behind Arston's research is that what works in the developed world is often much more difficult to deliver in the developing world and simply too costly to purchase. A vaccine that requires a sterile syringe, refrigeration prior to injection, and repeated booster shots is difficult to implement in many countries. And yeah, that was one of the things that they had talked about in the very beginning when they were implementing the whole rollout of Ebola vaccines in Africa, was the lack of refrigeration and how they had to transport it there quickly and get it into people before they ran into storage issues. Says, unfortunately, this often means that people who need the vaccine most cannot get it. And in a discussion of his work, Arston points out that each year diarrhea kills 2.5 million children under the age of 5. Okay. So while Arston's edible vaccine is likely to win approval from children everywhere, and that is in the banana, there are actually significant medical advantages to this route of administration. An oral vaccination incorporated into a plant bypasses the need for syringes, costly refrigeration, or multiple injections. And furthermore, since many of the developing world's most deadly diseases, cholera, rotavirus, and E. coli infections, to name a few, enter the body through the gastrointestinal tract, a vaccination that is ingested may actually provide the best protection because it mimics the natural route of infection. Developing the edible vaccine. The trick with an edible vaccine is convincing a plant to express the genes of a foreign organism. Fortunately, Arston's prior work prepared him to face this challenge. As a biochemist, his career focused on unraveling the means by which photosynthetic membranes in a plant capture solar energy. And what we've done for the last 10 years is try to change the cellular machinery of the plant by adding a new gene, causing that gene to make a new protein, and then coaxing the new protein into folding to the desired shape so that it accumulates. Yeah, so they've been experimenting with folding proteins too, which is very interesting. I took knowledge about plant proteins under normal circumstances and used that for something new. That something was new vaccine development. And when Arston started investigating the vaccine issue in the early 1990s, right about the time when they started introducing GMO food into the food supply, scientists were already using genetically engineered yeast to produce proteins for injection vaccines. Did we know that in the early 1990s? No, I know I didn't. Arston's experience with green plants led him to consider other options, and he remembers thinking at the time, would it be possible to use a higher plant instead of a lower plant, something we already know is an agricultural crop? Can we take a potato or a tomato and turn it into a green factory? Well, how amazing is it that we found out we had the flavor savor tomato that came out in the early 90s that we didn't know on the market, and we now have the Simplot potato. It doesn't go brown on the market as well. Challenges beyond science. And yet the challenges of science are not the only obstacles. The type of project requires a multidisciplinary approach. Blah, 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 blah. All right. Not everyone agrees with him. Critics of GMO. I got a lot more to read, and this is just kind of setting the stage. Okay, setting the stage for the banana vaccine. Well, for now, all such clinical trials, so this is in 2005, will involve modified potatoes or tomatoes. Both products can easily be freeze-dried, transported, and reconstituted. And since many target countries have a long history of herbal medicine, this might explain why Big Pharma was getting into sequencing the DNA of herbals. If you remember, we looked at that about a year ago. Since many target countries have a long history of herbal medicine, Artson is interested in working within already existing ideas. Our goal is not to make the decision for how we want the freeze-dried dose introduced. We want to work with them. And, as I started really digging into this, one of the countries that's working on the edible vaccine, and it looks like they're doing a lot of forward leaps and bounds, is India. Oh, yes, and India is an long-term herbal, thousands of years country. In the meantime, Arston is still working on the banana vaccine, and his original utopian vision was of a communal banana tree where villagers could dose themselves. Kind of like the poison apple now, isn't it? Unfortunately, this scenario does not adequately address the concerns related to the vaccination protocol, which is efficiency, quality control, and dosage regulation. As a result, Arston's current efforts focus on tomatoes and potatoes, which have shorter growing seasons, are easier to manipulate in an experimental setting, can be freeze-dried in controlled doses. And practicality hasn't inhibited his idealism, and to this day keeps a jar of Gerber's baby food, banana, of course, on the corner of his desk for inspiration. A jar of Gerber's banana baby food. Oh my God, is that what they're thinking? And I mean, have they done this? This is 2005, people. How would we know? How would we know? So, all right, now let me click around and fast forward to what I wanted to share. So there's his story, and that just kept bombing out on me. This is out, and again, another page. Here we go. This is out of Scientific India by the Scientists for the People, August 15th, 2014. So just over a year ago. Edible vaccines, a new approach to oral immunization health. Yes. So let's fast forward almost 10 years and go to India. Today, a majority of peoples are subjected to several infectious diseases, so it is necessary to produce new vaccines that have economic and other advantages over existing injectable vaccines. And we know good old Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been very well known in India doing vaccine trials. In view of this, recently plants are being used as an alternative vaccine production system because of its several advantages over animal systems. The first human clinical trials of an edible vaccine took place when? In 1997, when volunteers ate raw potatoes genetically engineered against diarrhea-causing E. coli. I bet that this was Arnston's work. 10 of the 11 volunteers who received the vaccine had a 4-fold rise in serum antibodies. And edible vaccines hold a great promise as a cost-effective, easy to administer, easy to store, and socio-culturally readily acceptable vaccine delivery system, especially for poor developing countries. It involves introduction of selected desired genes into plants and then inducing these altered plants to manufacture the encoded proteins. Introduced as a concept about a decade ago, which is right about when that story came out in 2005, it has become a reality today. Ding, 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 ding. Who would have thunk it? I don't see this on front page New York Times. Step right up and get your genetically modified potato and tomato vaccine. A variety of delivery systems have been developed and initially thought to be useful only for preventing infectious diseases. But now it has also been used in what birth control, and cancer therapies. I just can't believe what I'm reading. They talk about pulling the thread on the sweater and like the whole freaking sweater just unraveled. Bloop. Oh my God. Edible vaccines are currently being developed for a number of human and animal diseases. There is a growing acceptance of transgenic crops in both industrial and developing countries. Yes, especially the United States, which is the mecca for GMO foods. Resistance to genetically modified foods may affect the future of edible vaccines. They have passed the major hurdles in the path of an emerging vaccine technology, and various technical obstacles, regulatory and non-scientific challenges need to be overcome. Yes, those tinfoil hat wearing lunatics who don't believe that GMOs are safe. But hey, anyone who is worried about the safety of their food now has a mental disorder. So don't worry about it, because we got treatments for that. Back to the story. Like conventional subunit vaccines, edible vaccines are composed of antigenic proteins and are devoid of pathogenic genes. Thus, they have no way of establishing infection, assuring its safety, especially in immune-compromised patients. Conventional subunit vaccines are expensive, and technology is invasive. It needs purification, requires refrigeration, and produce poor mucosal response. In contrast, edible vaccines would enhance compliance, especially in children, and because oral administration would eliminate the need for trained medical personnel. The production is highly efficient, and they can easily be scaled up. For example, the hepatitis B antigen required to vaccinate the whole of China annually could be grown on a plot 40 acres, and all babies in the world each year on just 200 acres of land. They are cheaper, sidestepping demands for purification, grown locally using standard methods, and do not require capital-intensive pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities. Mass indefinite production would also decrease dependence on foreign supply, and they exhibit good genetic stability. They are heat stable. They do not require cold chain maintenance. They can be stored near the site of use, eliminating long distance transportation, and non-requirement of syringes and needles also decreases the chance of infection. Fear of contamination with animal viruses like mad cow disease, ding ding, which is a threat in vaccines. Get that? Which is a threat in vaccines manufactured from cultured mammalian cells, guys. Well, that's the first time I've heard that. And there is bovine serum in a lot of the vaccinations. You'll see that listed on the ingredient list. Did not know that they were worried about that. So the fear of contamination with animal viruses like mad cow disease, which is a threat in vaccines manufactured from cultured mammalian cells, is eliminated because plant viruses do not affect humans. Edible vaccines activate both mucosal and systemic immunity as they come in contact with the digestive tract lining, and this dual effect would provide the first line of defense against pathogens invading through mucosa like Mycobacterium tuberculosis and agents causing diarrhea, pneumonia, STDs, HIV, etc. Woo! Sounds like an orgy of vaccines ready to rock and roll to me. Scientists place high priority on combating the diarrheal agents, Norwalk virus, rotavirus, Vibrio cholerae, and E. coli, responsible for about 3 million infant deaths a year, mainly in developing countries. Administration of edible vaccines to mothers might be successful in immunizing the fetus in vitro by transplacental transfer of maternal antibodies or the infant through breast milk. Edible vaccines seroconvert even in the presence of maternal antibodies, thus having a potential role in protecting infants against diseases like Group B streptococcus, respiratory syncytial virus, which is RSV, etc., which are under investigation. So I wonder how many pregnant Indian mothers are eating edible vaccines to see if it will help their child in utero. Oh my God. And you know, when you start looking at the Vaccinate All Children Act of 2015 and how Monsanto has been rubber stamped, and we looked at Michael Taylor and Tom Vilsack in high places within our regulatory agencies. We look at how this biopharma and DARPA is involved in these tobacco vaccines for producing antibodies, and we're going to get to that. Hopefully I don't run out of time. Anyway, let's finish the story. They may be integrated with other vaccine approaches, and multiple antigens may also be delivered. Various foods under study are the banana, potato, tomato, listen to this, rice, lettuce, etc. I didn't know about lettuce. And edible vaccines are currently being developed for a number of human and animal diseases, including cholera, foot and mouth disease, hepatitis B, C, and E. And there's more, but I think I got to jump to this other study. So this study is from May 1st of 2014, titled Edible Vaccines, a New Approach to Oral Immunization. And actually, I'm going to save this for tomorrow. That is actually a study. What I want to find now is this story that connects all the dots we've been connecting. This is on the online library at Wiley.com, Plant Biotechnology Journal. This is by Charles Arzon, the same guy that we had read the story from 2005, except this article was, and I couldn't even believe it because I did a Google search for anything published in the last week, and I could not believe I actually found something by Charles Arzon himself, published September 8th, 2015, which was less than a week ago, people. Plant-made pharmaceuticals. From edible vaccines to what? Oh, Ebola therapeutics. Yes! This is exactly where they are using the tobacco and the RNAi vaccine. Check this out. It says, as I sat writing this personal reflections manuscript in the spring of 2015, I was seeing press reports related to the use of tobacco to make an Ebola therapeutics called ZMapp. For several months, newspaper articles, radio shows, and hour-long TV documentaries, and maybe you heard one of our shows because we talked about this, have given the public unprecedented exposure to the fact that plant-made pharmaceuticals, or PMP for short, can be life-saving drugs. I have been asked by many non-specialists, why tobacco? How can this work? And after spending over 20 years doing research in this field and many, many hours in public policy meetings promoting PMPs as an important tool of public health, I do not tire of hearing these same questions. And although there is an increasing pipeline of new protein drugs that will come from plants for both human and animal health, the general public has little knowledge, yes, they do, of these specialized tools and therefore limited support for the fields. ZMapp has given us free advertising on an international scale that I could never have anticipated. Ding, 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 ding. I mean, guys, this is all one big ugly circle. But I knew this thread was worth pulling on, and I knew that there was more, and I can't believe the connections that we found here. This is just really unbelievably sick. So, talking about nutraceuticals and 3D printed bug proteins and whatever, don't think that this isn't all part of the same puzzle. On August 4th of 2014, I opened an email from Larry Zentlin, who is the president of MAP Biopharmaceuticals in San Diego, California. It was a short message that alerted me to the fact that ZMapp had been used to treat 2 missionaries in Liberia. and that they were recovering from severe Ebola infection. By that afternoon, the news wires were alive with stories with such titles such as Secret Serum, which when they didn't say what the secret serum was, that was when we started digging into Texas A&M and the tobacco plant. Secret Serum likely saved Ebola patients. And it was hardly a secret to Larry or me or our colleagues at Arizona State University that they had received substantial grant funds in 2002. And we even read about Arizona State's biotech program, including a subcontract to our colleagues in San Diego. MAP Biopharmaceuticals was incorporated then the following year. And yeah, isn't that how it happens? You get like DARPA money, you come up with an idea, and then you incorporate and go public and have an emergency to be able to start using your untested vaccines under Project BioShield. Back to his story, we had proposed to who? Oh, yes, the U.S. Army, that plants, specifically tobacco, could be used for rapid production of vaccines or monoclonal antibodies that might be necessary to protect us from bioterrorism. So guess what? It is. It's Project BioShield. And when I first started taking those classes on Homeland Security back in 2006, they had told us that they were working on that universal flu vaccine, which then, when we started doing research, was being done in the tobacco plants. Anyway, so they got money from the U.S. Army that might help them do research on these vaccines and antibodies that might be necessary to protect us from bioterrorism. This was shortly after the terrorist attacks on New York and the Pentagon in 2001. Yes, again, it all goes back to 9/11, 2001, and that the use of anthrax for a bioterror attack in the U.S. Senate building, fundings for countermeasures were quickly becoming available. And on our 2005 final report for the Army contract ended with the statement, quote, "We have demonstrated that Ebola virus-specific humanized monoclonal antibodies can be produced using plant biotechnology." Research on our plant-made vaccines for biodefense has continued as collaborative programs between MAP and ASU, gradually involving a wider range of multidisciplinary participants. Chief among these were Kentucky Bioprocessing LLC, founded in 2006, Herta Steinkeller and her colleagues in Vienna, who contributed to the host plant glycoengineering skills, Yuri Gelda and his colleagues at Icon Genetics, and skilled teams at the Army Medical Research Institute for Infectious Diseases, who conducted preclinical studies of our Ebola-related products. Back-to-back ASU and MAP publications in 2011 described our process in protecting animal models from Ebola infection using plant-made vaccines or antibodies. All right, events leading up to edible vaccines. The first half of my scientific career has been entirely devoted to plant biology, and we did know that. And his history, he was at DuPont Company in 1984, and then he went to where? Texas A&M. While at Texas A&M, I had wonderful good fortune to meet Hugh Mason, a postdoc in biochemistry, and they did all kinds of research as well. In 2004, then he helped organize a conference on vaccinations and plant-derived vaccines and antibodies. And let's go forward, the recent past and looking ahead. For the last 14 years since he moved to ASU, which was Arizona University, my major contribution to science has been the design and management of multidisciplinary and multi-component projects, especially those that link academia to the industry. The success of Prolex Biotherapeutics in gaining FDA approval for an enzyme therapeutic for human use was a milestone in the field, and ongoing product introduction by them and by Medigaco. Medigaco was another one of those biopharma companies working with tobacco, and Ventria, to name a few. As for me, I will return this discussion to ZMAP, which I used to introduce this manuscript. And although I have only played a small role in development of this product, it is incredibly rewarding to see that something I started as a hypothesis has actually been used in life-saving treatments. I've been fortunate in working with the team of people at ASU, with companies with extraordinary and complementary skills. And I am not yet ready to quit, as I believe that a plant-made norovirus vaccine will only come if we can find a formulation that will work as a robust mucosal vaccine, and we have ongoing research with that goal in mind. And this is an edible vaccine because it started events leading up to edible vaccines. I wanted to find where they actually had people eat this Ebola vaccine. And guys, it's already 57. I can't even believe it. So you know what? Tomorrow we are going to get into the scientific study out of Health Magazine, a new approach to oral immunization, and dig a little bit deeper into what they've put it in the potato, the tomato, and who the hell knows what else. Tobacco-derived plant antibodies enter the fight against Ebola. Actually, I wonder if they've been getting them to eat it in Africa. I guess last but not least, wait, let's go to one more story. Do we have time? Yeah, we got a minute. If I can get this to load. Hold on. Hold the phone. Lab-grown burgers now cost less than $10. Yes. Especially since now we might find out that prion disease is spread just through consuming or being exposed. Lab-grown burgers would probably be the next available way, especially to get rid of carbon problems. And you know what? The story isn't going to load, so we might have to look at this tomorrow. Says nobody is happy about the meat industry. It's cruel, expensive, and environmentally unfriendly. And producing 1 pound of burger requires about 13 pounds of grain, which of course carries a huge carbon footprint. It also requires raising and killing about 1/500th of a cow in squalid conditions and costs a lot more than the same nutritional value as chickpeas or eggs. So GMO beef, here it comes. All right, guys, make sure you stick around. It's Monday. Ms. Lonnie Clark is up next. Truth on the Tracks, brand new, live at 9:10. Cutting through the Matrix with Alan Watton, 11 into media.